Today in Legal Yes, Vanderpump Rules as Faith Sowers sets up a GoFundMe to remove Stassi Schroeder's book from shelves. And Kevin Costner gets into a fight with his tenant, Pete Davidson charged, and Russell Simmons' war with his daughters. And Meghan Markle and Spotify part ways. We've got that plus so much more on today's Legal Yes. Hey everyone, welcome to Legal Yes. I'm Christina. That's, of course, Neama Rahmani, President and CEO of West Coast Trial Lawyers. Hi, Neama. How are you?
Great, Christina. How's it going?
Good, good. We got a lot of people talking last week about Kroy and Kim's divorce. I want to read off a couple comments. Marie says, Kroy asking for a guardian to help and be a legal representative for the kids seems really mature and fair and equal of him. Maybe he has motive behind it, but it seems like a good move on his part. Do you recommend that when divorces get really messy, especially with young kids involved, that maybe a representative steps in?
I do. With these nasty divorces, oftentimes it's the judge that will step in and appoint a guardian, oftentimes a guardian ad litem, a guardian for a particular case. So the fact that Kroy is making this recommendation could be for good reasons or it could be for not so good reasons. But either way, I think it's the best result for the kids.
Definitely. And then Tracy says, talking about Louis, and Teresa says, hired is the key word here, talking about his relationship with private investigator Bo Dietl. Says, don't fall for word salad. He could have done some kind of service or exchange or favor in lieu of files on castmates. Could that be possible? I guess, in exchange, I'll do work for you, you do work for me.
It could be. We don't know what type of relationship he has with his investigator, but these investigators can use deceptive means to get information, and that may be what's happening here. We don't know how they're paid. Oftentimes, it's by cash or check or credit card. Usually you don't see an exchange of services, but anything's possible.
Anything is possible when it comes to these housewives. All right, let's move on to a story that has taken a lot of people by surprise this week. So Spotify has parted ways with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. And now a new report is alleging that Meghan's interviews for her podcast were not conducted by her. So Pod News reported that some of the show's interviews were done by members of the Duchess's staff, and they edited everything together afterwards. They ended their $20 million deal. This was supposed to be over 3 years. They mutually parted ways, and they said that they're proud of the series that they made together. But if Meghan kept Spotify in the dark about not doing these interviews, could Spotify demand their money back? Because it seems like they were supposed to produce a lot of series for Spotify and they just kind of didn't deliver.
Yes. If Meghan Markle delegated her tasks to others, that could be a material breach of her agreement with Spotify. Oftentimes in an agreement, you can have someone else perform for you. But if it's something like this and the folks want the prince and they want Meghan, you're not going to be able to delegate those duties. So this is the type of case that if Meghan did breach the terms of her agreement with Spotify, they could absolutely get their money back or maybe even sue for damages.
Right. And it seems like they ended this deal a little bit early. Since they did underdeliver, did Spotify maybe have to pay Harry and Meghan out of the full contract to end this deal? Or do they kind of leave some money on the table?
Well, it's impossible to know what happened behind the scenes. But if there was a breach, let's say Meghan breached, then Spotify would have several options. They could sue, they could rescind the deal, or they could try to potentially work out some sort of resolution with Meghan and the prince. So it really depends on what negotiations happened behind the scenes, but it seems, at least to me, the parties decided to walk away. It's just a question of who paid whom.
Right. And like you said, we don't know exactly what the deal was, what it entailed, but it seems like they want to take archetypes to another platform. But does Spotify, since it was originally on their platform, does Spotify own archetypes? Or I'm sure they probably worked that out in the deal where they can kind of take this anywhere.
I'm sure that was part of the resolution, but these types of sort of exclusivity or non-compete type arrangements are pretty common when you're dealing with media. Obviously, if you're Spotify and you have Meghan doing your podcast, you'd probably want to prevent her from doing other podcasts. You want some sort of exclusive type arrangement. So now that the deal is no longer there, I would imagine that Meghan is free to take her talents elsewhere. But again, that's something that was probably worked out behind the scenes.
All right, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Well, moving on to some messy family drama, Russell Simmons took to social media to share a very cryptic message that implied his ex-wife, Kimora Lee Simmons, was the reason behind his strained relationship with his daughters after their daughters praised their mother on Father's Day. So Aoki Lee responded to Russell's story by releasing a series of really heated text messages between her and her father. She shared an emotional video explaining the drama, saying, "My father is not well. For years, he needs help and won't accept that he refuses to acknowledge he is not himself. He has threatened and bullied my sister, my grandma. He has harassed my grandma in the middle of the night in poor health, sent a man to my sister's apartment at 2 a.m. to scare her, and so on and so on." She said that he threatened her career by saying she would never get a job in fashion again if she spoke out. Kimora, of course, defended her daughters and saying that she's sorry that she has to make this public, but this man has been threatening my kids' lives. So can the daughters take legal action against their father? I know he spoke out. I know he apologized and things like that, but can the daughters take legal action if they really wanted to?
Well, you can always take legal action, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good case. Really the question is, what did Russell do? Really, was it sort of extreme and outrageous conduct? Then you may have an emotional distress type claim, but those are generally difficult to prove. So I would say, absent some more evidence, it'd be tough to file a case against your family member unless there's really some extreme and outrageous conduct that results in damages. And I just don't see that, at least not yet, from what's been made public so far.
Right. But what about on Russell's side? Does he have a case since their families made these issues public, since Kimora, maybe against his ex-wife, since she made this public and kind of aired their dirty laundry?
So it really comes down to whether there was a reasonable expectation of privacy. So let's say Russell was communicating with his family and then I intercepted the text messages and made them public, then he would have a case against me. But once you send someone a message, that message is gone, and the person you send it to is free to share it with others. Now, there's some exceptions, of course, of this confidentiality if you're communicating with a doctor or a lawyer, but those rules don't apply to family members. So if you're sending someone a text message, a picture, a video, whatever the case may be, you should probably expect that that person, if things go south, is going to share it with others.
Definitely. All right. Well, Kevin Costner, this is another layer to this messy divorce. So Kevin Costner got into a very heated exchange with a tech titan who got kind of friendly with he and his wife while renting their guest house. So this is all according to a report by The Sun. So Christine, of course, filed for divorce from Kevin Costner last month after nearly 18 years of marriage. And he has since tried to have her vacate their shared home in California because after 30 days in their prenup agreement, she is supposed to vacate the premises. But prior to their breakup, they had somebody staying at their house as a house guest. His name is Daniel Starr, and he tried to boot the Starr out of his $60,000 a month beachfront guest house, which led to some volatile exchanges and a legal dispute. So Starr signed this year-long deal in 2022. He maintains that he did nothing wrong. He tried to send several letters and emails to try to work this out, but it didn't. So, but then there's another layer to this because according to The Sun, all three of them got pretty close. They hung out a lot, but then Christine didn't like his attitude towards their friendship, texted him and said that they wanted him out. Basically, then he decided to cut his lease short by 3 months. But does it seem like, what do you think maybe kind of went wrong here? And why would lawyers have to get involved?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin is in all sorts of legal problems. I mean, first, obviously, his soon-to-be ex-wife and now his tenant. So, when you have a tenant and there's a lease, you can't just kick them out. That's what a lease is for. And similarly, the tenant can't just leave. Both parties are bound to that agreement, but something obviously went sideways here. And when someone's living in your guest house, that can often be too close for comfort, where you see that person a lot, and you better make sure you have a good relationship with them before you invite them onto your property and enter into this sort of rental agreement. So it's gonna be interesting. I'm sure a lot of facts are gonna come out, particularly from Daniel's side over the coming days and weeks as to what really went on here.
Right. Yeah. Like this is just kind of getting started, so we don't know all the details, but when somebody does break a lease, would he have to, pay upfront, pay for the entire year? Like we said, we don't really know what went into this contract, but would he probably have to pay, the entire year? Or maybe they just both wanted to cut ties, or like, let's just leave this as is.
So the way it works is if the tenant breaches, that means the tenant decides to leave or stop paying rent before the term is up. So let's say 9 months into the term, there's 3 months left. The tenant would be obligated to pay for the 3 months But there's one important exception. The landlord, in this case, Kevin and Christine, they have a duty to mitigate their damages, which means they have a duty to try to re-rent the guest house to someone else. So if they don't do so, then the tenant, Daniel, can say, well, hey, you could have rented it out for 50% of the price or 80% of the price, or maybe even the full price, and I'm entitled to an offset. So the tenant has to pay the damages less whatever the unit could have been rented out for.
I don't think I want to be Kevin Costner right now.
No,
Definitely
not at all.
And I don't think I want to be Pete Davidson either, because he has been charged with reckless driving after crashing his car into a Beverly Hills home back in March. He was charged with 1 count of reckless driving 3 months after the accident took place. His arraignment is scheduled for next month. So he was driving in the Flats neighborhoods of Beverly Hills with his girlfriend when he lost control of the vehicle. His car reportedly jumped the curb and destroyed a fire hydrant before crashing into the side of a nearby home. He left marks on the lawn. Police were called to the scene. Nobody was arrested. They said no alcohol played a factor in the incident, that the only person that was home was the homeowner's 16-year-old daughter at the time. She was not injured. But can Pete face jail time for something like this, or will he, just have his license suspended or revoked?
Christina, it's possible, but it's very unlikely Pete Davidson is going to get jail time. And this is why, obviously I live in Los Angeles, and in the city of Los Angeles, our district attorney doesn't prosecute cases very aggressively. And this particular case, because it just involved property damage, it's only a misdemeanor. So the fact that Pete Davidson is likely going to be charged with a misdemeanor here in LA County, this is typically going to be a probation type of case, not a jail time type of case.
So probably license suspended, or will he have to pay a fine or something like that?
Well, potentially. So the suspension issue and the prosecution issue are separate. So the suspension issue would be handled by the DMV, and it's a point system. So reckless driving tends to be a 2-point offense. So if you accumulate a certain number of points, these aren't good points, these are bad points, over a certain period of time, that's when your license could get suspended or even revoked. So it really depends on what Pete's driving history has been. The charges are separate. So, theoretically, Pete Davidson could have his license suspended but not be prosecuted, or he could be prosecuted and charged and his license might be totally okay. So it's the DA that'll handle the charges and the DMV that'll handle the license issue.
We'll have to see what happens with Pete. All right. So this is an interesting story. So Stassi Schroeder from Vanderpump Rules, she may have been fired from the show several years ago, but Faith Stowers is now coming forward. They had a lot of legal issues back in the day. So Stassi was fired in 2020 and made a public apology because she made some racially charged statements at the time. So Stassi has come out with books and podcasts since then and kind of profited over her leaving. So Faith Stowers set up a GoFundMe and said, during my time there, I was publicly targeted and mercilessly verbally attacked by Stassi and Kristen Dowdy on multiple public platforms. These two women used their privilege and celebrity to try to tear me down at a very sad time in my life and in the country. She went on to say that she accepted Kristen's apology, but Stassi has written the books and things like that we said. And she says, after all she has done, she continues to stand by her ignorant claims that are very harmful to me and my family. I'm seeking assistance with my legal team to get this book removed and all royalties funds collected from this book be given to charity or assisting family of choice. So can somebody try to get a book removed from shelves that's already been published for quite some time, even though they may have say some damaging things about her, or she just doesn't like the platform that this person stands on?
Christian, you know me, I love getting involved in the Vanderpump Rules legal drama, but I don't think, and I think what happened to Faith is wrong, but you have to have an actionable claim. So, obviously there's freedom of speech in this country. And even though something may be racist, may be completely vile, disgusting, that doesn't mean you can get the book taken down. Now, you might be able to sue for defamation. The question is, what false statements were made and what were your damages? So, just being a racist, unfortunately, in this country is not actionable. Now, there's certain areas where it is, obviously in the workforce or in, certain, areas of public accommodation. But, if two friends or even enemies say mean, hurtful, or even racist things to one another, unfortunately, usually that's not something you can sue for.
Right. And there's probably no way for Stassi not to receive the royalties for her own book. So do you even foresee an attorney taking on something like this?
Well, we would need something more from Faith's side. So like you said, the royalties, that's an agreement between the publisher and Stassi. So the publisher is obligated to pay those royalties. Now, if someone were to sue Stassi, get a judgment, then that person can execute that judgment and garnish Stassi's wages, levy her bank accounts, do all the things you can when you get a judgment in a civil case. But first, you got to win before you can go after the assets.
Sure. Now, should other other authors maybe be on the lookout for something like this? Because could people use this case if it does go forward, which it seems like it probably won't, but like, can they use this case to fight previously released works for continuing to release, or like, are protections tight on this matter?
Well, yeah, the defamation, to the extent that something is published and continues to be published, right? So obviously statute of limitations in these types of cases, maybe when Stassi, put the book out, but let's say she's going on tour, she's doing podcasts, and she's repeating things that are defamatory, that's when you may be able to pursue a case. I mean, we saw this a little bit with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And Amber Heard said some things, time passed, there was some resolution, and then she, came out with that op-ed. So a lot of the defamatory statements, at least alleged defamatory statements, were repeated elsewhere and at a later time, in which case that allowed Johnny Depp to sue.
Yeah, definitely. Well, an interesting turn of events. Well, Neama, that is it for this week. Thank you so much for your expertise as always, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Christina. See you soon.
For more news, content, and exclusive interviews, make sure to hit the sub, like, and bell button down below and visit usmagazine.com.